Well, it's a cold, wet, rainy night outside. You may even be able to hear the rain on the roof, I'm not sure. But it's a good night to spend time with my stamps. Back when I was a 9-year-old living in England, I had to walk to school past a newsagent shop. And I used to stop every day so I could read the comics in the front window. And one day when I went past, they'd put some stamps up in the front window for sale as well. And I noticed one of them was a little island called Timor. And at the time, we were reading a book at school called The Coral Island by R.M. Ballantyne, which was really exciting for a 9-year-old. Anyway, I'd never heard of Timor, so I asked my teacher about it, and then I got really excited when I found out that this was an island in the South Pacific, and I started imagining that perhaps in Timor there were castaways and all the rest. Well, I was 9 years old, I didn't know much. I'm 74 years old now and I still don't know much, but that's another story. Anyway, I just had to have that stamp. So when I got my pocket money at the weekend, I remember it cost me a penny halfpenny, which I used to get 6p a week pocket money. So I went down and I bought that stamp, and I've still got it. And it started me collecting stamps, and I still do. But it's not been just a matter of just collecting pretty little pictures and sticking them into an album. For me, stamp collecting is the stories. So I've made quite a few collections that are built on the stories around the stamps, and I'd like to share them with you. And I'm going to start with one which details the Mussolini years in Italy. Well, we should start with a bit of backstory. Well, Benito Mussolini, he was born in Predappio. This postcard shows Mussolini's birthplace in Predappio. His father was a socialist who named his son after the left-wing president of Mexico, whose name was Benito Juarez. Until 1914, Mussolini himself was a prominent and an enthusiastic socialist, but he got expelled from the party because he supported Italy's involvement in World War I. He rejected the internationalist ideas of the socialists, and he formed a new party based on a mix of socialism and nationalism, which he called fascism, after the fasces, which was an axe with a handle made up of a bunch of rods that was the symbol of authority in ancient Rome. Mussolini was not the only one to use this symbol. It also appeared on the United States mercury dime, which was symbolic of the Union being stronger than the individual parts. That's not to say the USA was approving of fascism. The mercury dime was designed in 1916, 3 years before Mussolini chose the same symbol. Even so, after 1945, the design was changed, and the axe was replaced by a bunch of rods topped with a flame. During the turbulent years after World War I, the fascists grew in power. In 1922, they seized power in much of the country, and then they marched on Rome and they brought the city to a standstill. King Victor Emmanuel III was expected to declare martial law to deal with the fascists, but instead he appointed Mussolini as Prime Minister and asked him to form a government, and within 5 years this had become a dictatorship. Shortly after gaining power, the fascists announced the fact to the world by releasing a set of stamps showing the ancient Roman symbol of authority, the fasces. This had been proven to be stronger than a single shaft, hence the symbolism. In 1870, following the unification of the rest of Italy, the Piedmont forces annexed Rome and confiscated much of the territory that had formerly been the Papal States. This led to a standoff between the Catholic Church and the state that was to last for almost 60 years. The Church saw in fascism a possible protection from the growth of communism, which encouraged members to leave the Church and seek their rewards on earth. So in 1929, Mussolini negotiated the Lateran Treaty with the Church, which gave it an area around the Vatican, roughly 25 hectares, as an independent state, and in return the Church gave their blessing to the fascists and recognised the King of Italy, which up until then they'd refused to do. This philatelically inspired cover to Switzerland bears the first stamps that were issued by the Vatican in 1929. My Uncle Ted fought in North Africa and up through Italy in World War II, and he sent lots of postcards home. And because he couldn't talk about where he was, he simply numbered all the cards and wrote the details in his diary for when he came home. Now my mother gave me some of his cards, and even back then I was a collector of anything I found interesting. When he saw these cards he was laughing, because the censor had blocked out the name of the place, and even at 9 years old I knew they were from Italy. Uncle Ted told me that was called military intelligence, and it seems fitting that they should be in this collection as a reminder of the lack of intelligence that saw the world tear itself apart. This armed forces card was sent to Italy after Ethiopia became part of the Italian East African Empire. In 1930, Italian forces crossed the border between Italian Somalia and Abyssinia, or Ethiopia, and built fortifications at the Welwel Oasis. It was a flagrant rejection of the League of Nations and the border agreement between the two parties. In December 1934, tensions over this incursion erupted into violence, which left 2 Italians and 150 Ethiopians dead. Hitler's Germany supported the Italian expansion, while Britain and France abstained from comment, as at this time they still wanted Italy as an ally against an expanding German power. In October 1935, Italy invaded. The Abyssinian army, though large, had little equipment, and the outcome was never in doubt. Parts of the Abyssinian army were armed with spears and bows and arrows. Many had never seen a plane, while the Italians used their air force to devastating effect. There were atrocities on both sides, but the Italians were ruthless in putting down any opposition. An estimated 10,000 Italians died, compared to 275,000 Abyssinians. Victory in Ethiopia in 1936 was the zenith of Mussolini's popularity, with thousands cheering his appearances. Many thousands of postcards showed how Mussolini was loved by the Italian people. This envelope's covered with slogans such as "God save the chief" and "the Romans." The victory was followed by such a massive investment in infrastructure in the new colony, the Italian economy was left unable to properly finance the modernisation of their armed forces. It also gave the Italian populace an unrealistic view of their armed forces. This wavered during the Spanish Civil War and was shattered a few years later when Italy joined World War II, allied to Germany. Few would have guessed that by war's end Mussolini would be one of the victims. Mussolini had a background both as a school teacher and a newspaper editor, and he was a voracious reader. It was said that he read every message and report that came to his office himself and decided what action to take. Reports addressed to him personally are not rare. They were usually in red envelopes. Unfortunately, a culture developed of telling him what he wanted to hear in reports rather than what he needed to hear, and he may not have been totally aware of the parlous state of his army. He did not like Hitler, and in private called him a monkey, but he was overwhelmed by the German military machine when he visited Munich in 1936 and signed the Pact of Steel, believing the German army was invincible. Hitler understood that an Italian army guarding his southern borders was desirable. Despite both nations being fascist, this didn't guarantee that they'd be aligned. Italy had a history of conflict with Austria, and Hitler was Austrian. Hitler was a wily politician. What he couldn't get by threats he would pursue with flattery, and in Mussolini he found a willing target. Mussolini was feted by the German leaders with parades, military shows and grandiose displays of Germany's massive rebuilding program. Special stamps, postmarks and souvenir cards were produced by the thousands to help lure Mussolini into the German fold. The pledges were taken and the marriage was arranged, but unfortunately for Italy, the honeymoon was soon over. Mussolini took his nation into a war that he could not afford, and most Italians did not want. Well, I think that's enough for one session. If you're still with me after all that lot, I'm hoping you possibly enjoyed it. So if you did, please hit the like button, and if you want to see the follow-up stories, hit the subscribe and then you'll know where they're coming. Thanks a lot for watching. See ya.